Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Mr. Fisher, and we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is business partnerships. Many of you know Mark and I have been friends for 30 years at this point. We met when we were about 15 years old, and we've been in a business partnership for about 15 years. And so in this episode, we share some of our lessons learned as being in a business partnership. We also share a lot of pitfalls we see about why a lot of business partnerships fail. So if you are in a business partnership or thinking about getting in one, this is a great episode for you to learn from our mistakes and hopefully not repeat them. So keep on listening, my friend. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm back again with Mr. Fisher. How are you, my friend?
I am good. I just flew back from Chicago and I feel a little out of my mind. So let's see where this goes, listener.
Perfect. Perfect time to record a podcast when you're just feeling like you don't know where you are. Before we dive into today's topic, which is all about business partnerships, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of you out there who have not raised your rates for your clients in a long time. Friends, it's past due. It's past time to raise your rates. For all of you who own gyms, you want to be raising your rates every year like clockwork to make sure that you are not just making less money every year. And we make it easy for you to do that because we know it can be a little stressful to tell everyone you're going to cost more every year. And we made it easy by making you a playbook. So we have a Raise Your Rates playbook. It's free for you on our website. Click the link down below in the show notes. Fisher, do you just want to say like how critical this is? I mean, like just why should they be raising their rates all the time like clockwork?
Yeah,
Let's spell it out.
Kind of covered it. Yeah, I mean, well, everything is going to keep getting more expensive, right? So everything else is going to get more expensive. Your landlord's not going to not raise your rent. Your electric company's not going to not raise the cost of electricity. And ultimately, it's a business. People get it. So download it.
And your team's not going to be fine with making the same amount of money forever.
Yeah,
right? Everyone wants more money from you every year.
Nor should you. You should make
more. So yes, 100%. So that means the rates got to go up. So go click it, get the free report, and go do it. That's it. We'll leave it there. Let's talk about business partnerships. This is a topic that we've covered on this podcast probably a long time ago, but it's been so long. I think we probably have kind of new things to say about it. And the reason I think this topic matters so much is we see a lot of gyms owned by partners. In many cases, like life partners, like husbands and wives, spouses, and also by friends. And we even see a lot of people start off as solos and then get a partner. And we've also been helpful with a lot of people in breaking up with their partners. And so I think this is a really important topic for small business owners like ours. And I think in today's podcast, we want to talk about mistakes we've made and lessons we've learned. And so, where do you want to start us off, Fisher?
That's a good question. I mean, I think maybe we can unpack a little bit about what we see that doesn't go great. What, like maybe some examples of some things we've seen that have not been a good idea. The most obvious one that's springing to mind, of course, is just a failure to communicate. What we have here is a failure to communicate. It is very often in partnerships. And it depends. And again, I'm happy to say this hasn't been my experience with you, Keeler, but I can imagine it could be difficult to express how you're feeling about things if there's not a lot of safety and security in the partnership, if you are not practiced at learning how to share potentially difficult things to hear in a way that the other person can hear it, that doesn't deny them of their dignity, that comes in with humility, but is also really direct. So you're getting the thing off your chest and you're not like, over time carrying the extra slowly increasing sediment and weight of grievances that feel unheard. So I think that is a thing that I think is super, super important that can go awry. Because if you have an employee, it's a little bit easier to some extent, right? Even though it's still scary to say something that's going to make somebody potentially sad. And some people just dislike disagreeing, right? That's another thing that, maybe you can speak to a little bit, because unfortunately I don't mind disagreeing, which is like weird because I think I'm a friendly guy. I think I'm like a very maybe even nice to a fault, but I also have no problem being like, no, I disagree. Like in all sorts of things, all sorts of inappropriate social issues where I'm like, I don't agree with that. I think that's wrong. Here's why.
I have a theory about that, but keep on going.
Oh, do tell me.
Yeah. So I think you and I and this is just a theory, so I could be wrong here, but I think you and I
Oh,
are
exciting.
uniquely good at disagreeing because we come from the performing arts. Because we
Hmm.
grew up in environments where we were constantly getting real time feedback, both on stage and off, from teachers telling us, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. Right. And having having to collaborate in real time with other performers and artists that, like, not that doesn't
Ah,
hurt sometimes, that doesn't sting, but I think we
yeah,
got a lot
of
more
course.
practice because in that environment, like, in a dance studio or a vocal studio or putting on a show, there's collaboration like that is encouraged for a lot of folks, and for a lot of
Yeah.
folks who run gyms, the environment they grew up in was was one of one directional feedback, in often,
Mm.
which is what, like, sports looks like your coaches give you feedback, but you don't talk back to them. You don't, if you disagree with them, that's your own business. The
Mm.
conversation is not open. So I think we got a lot of practice doing, and it wasn't always great, but I'll speak for myself then and say that I feel like, growing up in a kind of artistic, creative environment meant that I was constantly having to navigate my disagreements with people. And it didn't
Yeah.
mean I didn't like them. And I think that's kind of rubbed off on our partnership.
Interesting. Well, I mean, this is very interesting to hear because I think that might be, as at the risk of now losing all of our listeners while we talk about doing theater
Yeah,
growing
when we talk
up.
about theater,
Well,
y'all stay with us.
yeah. Well, I mean, you were a member of the creative team, right? Because I can't say that I didn't feel that my thoughts were valued per se, but I didn't really feel necessarily that I was like partnering or collaborating. Like I did my thing, and I like broadly
Oh,
was
you're
told
talking
what
about
to do.
like community theater specifically.
I think so. Well, I think also our specific roles, right? Where oftentimes I, was playing a role, but I'd never really collaborated on the creation of it. And I think perhaps because
Mm,
you were on the creative team, you maybe had more
yeah,
reps and people that were often quite older than you. I would imagine there was this opportunity of you sort of coming into the
yeah,
slightly more adult role, transitioning from like this like kid essentially to someone that's collaborating with these older adult figures. And that wasn't my experience, nor actually can I hold up that this thesis has been my experience of working broadly with artists that they're pretty good at. Uh, I think unsentimentally sharing what they
yeah.
think in a
Well,
direct way.
yeah. Well, I'll bring it back to gyms in a second. The last thing I'll say about
Yeah.
this is that, I was thinking just broadly throughout my, even undergraduate, for those of you listening to the podcast who don't know, my undergraduate degree, my BFA, is in dance, right? So I spent 4 years, with other dancers and choreographers. And even in that environment where, I was not on the one in charge, I felt like I had a lot of reps in with giving and receiving feedback in real time. But I think the point we're making here for you gym owners is is that the big mistake we see people make is not having lines of communication open. By building habits of not talking about things that matter,
Yeah,
just
that's not good.
walls we put up, sometimes very slowly, over years and years and years, armor we put on that gets built up over time. And I talk all the time to Unicorn Society members that are partners, and they see every single disagreement as a fight, as a threat. Every time we are not seeing eye to eye, there's a conflict, right? And then that can be really scary. It makes sense that you're avoiding open communication when you see every single disagreement as a threat, as an argument. And I think, the thing you want to get to is you want to get enough reps in of disagreeing and still liking each other, that you realize that not every disagreement has to be combative. Not every disagreement has to be a fight. But I think you're right that that's one, for many reasons, art or not, that we haven't had a ton of. But I want to name one that I think we have had from time to time. So I think another really common pitfall for partners is having role bleed and
Yeah.
stepping on each
Yeah.
other's toes, right? So a benefit to having partners is that you get to divide and conquer. You get to each have a lane to run in when you're functioning at the highest level. And, ideally, you each have different lanes and different strengths where you get to, like, do your best work and really sprint in the direction of your goals. And from time to time, this has totally happened to us on and off. And I think we've gotten better and better at separating it. But sometimes our interests would just kind of collide. We both want to have a say in certain things. And we both would be kind of unwilling to quickly let go and say, no, no, you just take it because I wanted to be involved. And so every time we got that sense that we were both working on the same things, we were slowing each other down, sometimes faster than others, we found a way to kind of peel those things apart and go back to creating clear lanes for each other. And I see that happening all the time in partnerships.
Yeah, you know what's interesting too is one of the patterns that I've noticed too and as I've observed is in our dynamic. Oftentimes, it's clear to you, and it's not clear to me often that there's getting a drag, and that too
Mm,
has maybe changed. Maybe I've gotten a little bit more sensitive as I've gotten older, but oftentimes I have felt sort of like, I yeah, sure, you want this, yeah, let's cool, but yeah, let's do a rules thing, and then afterwards I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier now. I didn't realize how much drag there was, you know. And I would circle
yeah.
back to maybe the first point being like the master model of this, because again this isn't an issue if you're able to just talk about it and have it like not be a big deal. Like it's not this weird
Yes.
territorial thing. It's just like this isn't efficient, I don't think. Um, and if I can offer, unless there's anything else about that, I have one other thing that also
Yeah.
I think
Go
is
for
not
it.
helpful, which is maybe the
Yeah.
opposite of being unwilling to say the thing, and that is just being so absolutely convinced that you're correct and the other person's wrong that there's no space for
Mm,
humility or sincere curiosity, right? Because that's the other thing
yeah.
too that I think has worked for us is, uh, an ability to. I will often see you do this where like I can tell you're so convinced that you're absolutely right, and this is not even worth going down there, but at the same time you know it's good to be curious, and you will force yourself to ask questions and jump over the
Yes.
bridge because there's something here that you're not seeing, that you, even if you still come
Through
down,
gritted
you
teeth. Yeah.
yeah, you
Through,
know
yeah.
that you don't have the full picture yet, so you really can't feel this strongly yet. Which for me, this
Yeah.
comes down to like I think like the value of all critical thinking, right? Like contra, I think perhaps the second point where you feel like if there's a disagreement, things are at risk. There is the probably apocryphal. I don't know that word. Whatever. It's a word means somebody
Yep.
said or they didn't say. That's what it means, listeners. Somebody said or they didn't say it. IBM executive that when two executives agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary, right? So you actually
Mm-hmm.
want the disagreement, and you want to be able to share those disagreements in ways that are direct. But I think the other element is to acknowledge that you don't have this all figured out and you really could be wrong. You really could be wrong. Or at least
Yeah.
entertaining, even though in your
100%.
heart you're like, I'm sure I'm right, but say more anyway.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think a big part of our jobs is being able to be decisive when necessary. So we need to have that
Yeah.
muscle that is like, yeah, I'm right, let's do it, right? And you have to be willing to question that muscle almost all the time. And I think we've both gone through those periods where like, yeah, I'm pretty sure my mind's not changing about this, but let's keep talking about it because clearly we're on different pages.
Yep.
And like, and we've learned so much that way. We learned so much
Totally.
that way, and that's something I'll speak for myself that was not natural for me. I think I am by upbringing a very stubborn person. Like even as a child I was very kind of set in my ways and stubborn. I had to learn, that's a skill I worked on for the last few decades to like really be curious and be collaborative, and even when I think I'm right, and in fact know I'm right, to say, okay, well, what could I be wrong about, right, takes a kind of humility that did not come natural to me.
Mm.
And I still have to fight for it some days when I'm feeling particularly, tired or, ornery for whatever reason. And I think it's that kind of being willing to challenge yourself and question yourself that is that kind of self work that's never really finished. We're always going to be working on some version of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I
The
know
reality
we've kind
is,
of been doing this. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the reason this is so important is you're never able to see all the sides. Like that's why a single
Yeah.
person can't ever do this. Apparently, the theater podcast, but that's why like I really think it's very difficult to accurately direct yourself in a play. Maybe in a movie because you
Hmm.
can look at the reels, but directing oneself in a play feels like a very difficult thing to
Yeah.
do because you just can never replace the outside eye. You just can't see yourself. You can't see your own biases. So your dream
Hmm.
scenario is, and listen, it doesn't necessarily need to be a partner. I think that can be particularly valuable situation. I think it can be particularly fraught, particularly if there's not clarity in how decisions are made. And I'd highlight that. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe worth its own podcast to figure out how you break ties if you're a true 50-50 partnership. But I think whether this is with a partner or, maybe you get lucky and you find we've had certainly some very contentious team members over the years, people that are really willing to disagree. It's kind of valuable. It's what you want,
Yeah.
and it's also, I, would be remiss in not mentioning it's part of the benefit of having a coach.
Yeah. 100%. I think, and I've had, I don't know, every week I have somewhere between 5 or 6 coaching conversations with both partners on the Zoom at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I really ever serve as a tiebreaker. I just serve as that third eye, right? I serve as that person who's on the outside who can reflect back what I see going on, either the dynamic between the two of them or the processes they're using or not using. And there's something about that that's so valuable. If you don't have it within your organization, you don't have that kind of, general manager who does that for you as owners, then I think that's when coaching, it's one of the reasons coaching can be so, so valuable. And I know I hear from all the time. Today I had a call with partners who said it was so great to have someone to just reflect back what we've been doing and not doing from an outside eye. And just, you can't replace it. You really can't replace it.
Gosh, it's almost making me wish that we had someone to like watch us talk, because maybe we're too self-satisfied about how good it's going, and we're unknowingly conspiring in some unhelpful patterns for everyone that around us that works, because the two of us are just so sure that, well, we're right about this thing, obviously. Because a great example of this is, and this is really striking me, that part of the benefit of the coach might be not only to be a pseudo thought partner, but also to be that outside eye on the relationship. So, my wife and I had a baby recently, and we decided, okay, we've been talking for years about hiring a therapist just to communicate better. And it's so fun. Now, admittedly, I'm a nerd, so I'm I'm maybe uniquely wired to find this so interesting, but it's so great and my wife is amazing. So it's also fun because we're both going into be like, well, here's where I think I'm sometimes contributing to the issue. So I'm probably doing this that's not helpful. And just the fun of having an outside eye that you trust help you unpack that dynamic can not only not be scary, it actually can be super fun and interesting, and you learn more, and it's more fun to work with the other person. The outcomes are better. I mean, what could be better?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, maybe we should go to therapy together.
We'll get,
why
Melanie's
not?
great.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share one more thing that I think is both a pitfall, and I'll share the upside is that I think another thing that's really hard to do in partnerships, well, in all relationships, but in partnerships, is to have clear boundaries with your partner. And I see this become particularly difficult when business partners are also really close friends or married or used to date. I've seen it all.
Sure.
In fact, we have all those scenarios. Yeah. We have many of those scenarios and more. Used to be married. It's all of it. When the life and work kind of intertwines in an unhelpful way, it makes all the things we've been talking about in terms of communication just more complicated. It just adds so much complexity when your relationship to that person is not just work spouse, but actual spouse. Or actual best friend, or actual, right? And I'm trying to think back, and maybe you have a better memory about this than I do. The only times I can think of that for us as an example as being a real issue is when we actually live together above the gym. So for Mark Fisher Fitness in Hell's Kitchen, we lived together at one point with our now husband and wife above the gym, and part of our apartment was the office, and we had to navigate multiple times back and forth about what are our boundaries. We don't have our home is our work is our home. When if I need to have a sick day and be here, how do we do that? When can I talk to you about work anytime? And for the longest time we did. Just any time we were together was fair game to talk about work. And over the time we had to be like, well, maybe we should check in with each other first. If I'm in my bedroom, maybe you don't just barge in and start a meeting, but I think that kind of stuff is really hard to do when your relationship is multi-layered. And on the whole, I think we've been good at it, but those are the times where I remember it being the hardest.
And it's interesting. When I think back to that time, lost in the mists of time, I remember we had a rule that we did for a while, and then towards the end, I think things were just getting busy, and I think we just allowed it to unravel. There was half of the apartment we wouldn't talk about work in, and then ultimately our offices moved into that part as we slowly took over the entire apartment for MFF.
Yeah,
I have to imagine, and I'm now not able to speak with firsthand experience here, this has to be very challenging in romantic relationships, because I imagine it's probably a little bit like having it's not the same as having a kid, but where the kid can dominate all the conversations, but you also want to have a connection outside of that. So I think that's another thing I can't speak prescriptively about, but I would imagine it's valuable to have some clarity around what hat you're
Yes.
wearing when you're explicitly going to have a relationship that is not about work, and put some real guardrails on what you're not going to talk
Yeah.
about, because it strikes me that that's actually a more intense version of a similar phenomenon that actually a lot of people have even in an office, where if you're the owner, you can drown in God minutes if everybody feels like it's okay to just like
Yep.
stop you at any given moment and start having a conversation with you, even if you're working on a project. I think
Yes.
that's hard enough in the confines of an office while you're at work where it's explicitly about work. I think that is a good boundary to set as well. But yeah, I
Yeah.
imagine it's quite dicey
Can,
if you're with the person always.
can I just say that this is without fail in a conversation I have with almost every business partnership that's joined Unicorn Society. Without fail, I ask them, like, I ask the business partners on one of our first coaching calls, when do you all meet each week? Like, what's your
Yes.
meeting pulse each week
Yes.
as business
Yes.
partners? And
Yes.
almost without fail, 100% say, well, we don't really have meetings because we're talking all the time. And it's the
Not good.
perfect example of like,
Not good.
yeah, no,
Stop
stop
it.
that. Right? No, have meetings and then stop talking to each other. Like, go
Yes,
do
put
other
it in a
things.
bucket. Put it in a little bucket. Maybe if a
Yes.
time sensitive thing comes up, that's fine. But here's another
Yes.
reason why the meeting pulse is so important, is because if you do have things to surface, they're not best addressed via an email. They're sometimes not.
Mm-mm.
They're not always best addressed in the moment. Though, if something comes up in a meeting, you can eventually get so skilled that, like, yeah, just like, I'm gonna feel it right now and just have it say it, and then we'll be done. We'll move on. We'll drink an espresso and it's fine. But yeah, having a container where the thing is go to. So if there are things you need to
Yes.
express, there's a holding place for it. And you all both know this is the time where we talk about strategy, we talk about big picture stuff. And it never really occurred
Mm-hmm.
to me, but I think implicit in that, I maybe have a unspoken, uh, I have an unspoken sense that that's also just a holder for if there happens to be a big emotion, which again, different people are wired differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like probably have more big emotions than most. And, God love you. You cold killer. You don't really inspire a lot of big emotions in me. So
So
that's
cold.
not been necessarily our dynamic. And partly
Mm-hmm.
because you do a wonderful job of, like, your presence de-escalates me. But with other people I've worked with, if we both run a little hot, that can be a thing. And then the meeting becomes a powerful place to, air that is a useful
Yeah.
and helpful space to have that conversation that doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere and in a strange place where the other person's not ready and it's just not in a good scene.
Yeah, gotta have that structure. Gotta have that structure. I think my final thing I'll say about this is that when we talk about time management, and a lot, the phrase that we'll often use is like, set up your day to be like a game you can win. And the same thing is true here, right? You have to set up your partnership to have these rules and boundaries that actually helps you be more effective. Like, set up these rules to be a game that you can both play together and win each week. And it requires rules. It requires some boundaries for how you'll behave with each other and without each other. Um, well, let's wrap it up there. We could do this all day, I think, but I don't even know if I can summarize this conversation. We covered so many different points. What would you say are some big takeaways here?
If I recall, if my jet lag brain is working properly, it's, be
Yeah,
candid, talk about the things that's actually going
yeah.
on. I
Open
think we also
communication for
covered
sure.
open communication. We covered the
Mm-hmm.
importance of having curiosity when you're having those
Mm-hmm.
conversations. You want to make some space for the other person's beliefs, even if you're entirely right. You want to understand
Yeah,
that disagreements are okay. They're not only okay, they're desirable.
yeah,
You want to disagree. It shouldn't put the relationship at threat. Uh, and then we discussed boundaries, setting boundaries so that you're able to understand where and when is the right place to have certain conversations, with the hyper actionable tactic being, if you do not have a standing, whether it be weekly or biweekly or twice per week, you can decide the pulse, but a standing meeting so that you're not constantly interrupting each other's flows with lots of random gotta minutes.
yeah. I love it. Yeah, great summary. I think those are some really key takeaways. Well, friends, for all you business partners out there, we hope this was helpful. If you're thinking about having a business partner someday, I hope this was helpful. And even if you are in neither of those buckets, hopefully you enjoyed us just going down memory lane, talking a little about theater and our life together.
Oh yeah,
um,
everyone loves theater.
but go grab that Raise Your Rates template. The link is down below. Raise your rates. You got to do it immediately, and leave us a 5-star review everywhere you listen to your podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks for the great conversation, Fisher. See you on the next one.
Bye.